The story begins with two girls walking through the forest, gathering firewood and food. Suddenly, one of them spots a plane falling from the sky. One of the passengers, a young man named Tsukasa, wakes up in a room where he is greeted by a girl. He vaguely remembers being on a falling plane and asks about the other passengers. The girl reassures him, saying that everyone survived. She notices he seems kind and smiles. Tsukasa introduces himself, and the girl says her name is Lyrule. He thanks her for saving him. Lyrule prepares some food and tries to feed him, but he's too weak to chew on his own. She decides to help by chewing a piece of meat herself and gently feeding him. They're both embarrassed, but Tsukasa thanks her. As they continue talking, another girl named Winona enters, teasing Lyrule. She introduces herself, and Tsukasa notes that the girls are dressed strangely. He thanks them again for helping him. Winona, noticing that he speaks like an adult despite looking young, jokingly says he reminds her of her son. Tsukasa is surprised. Winona looks too young to have a grown son, and he notices she has a tail. She lets him touch it, and he feels it is warm and real. Winona explains that they belong to a race of beast people. Lyrule then remarks that Tsukasa's clothing is unusual. Tsukasa explains he is from Japan, but Winona looks puzzled, saying she has never heard of such a place. Tsukasa is shocked. They don't even know Japanese, yet they are speaking it with him. Tsukasa realizes they are not lying and notices their genuine elven ears and tails. Realizing he is indeed in another world, he decides to accept his fate. Tsukasa asks to be taken to the crash site. The girls explain that 4 days ago, the whole village saw a massive object in the sky and heard a loud crash. That's how they found the plane. As he inspects the wreckage, Tsukasa is amazed that anyone could have survived such a fall. Suddenly, a dragon flies overhead and the girls pray. Tsukasa understands that this truly is another world. Later in the evening, the entire village gathers around a campfire, eating, drinking, and celebrating the rescue of the 7 strangers. The villagers are astonished to learn that they come from another world. Lyrule asks if it's true that there are no other races in their world. She explains that the locals are called beast people, and they refer to the guests as humans. Although they are rare, some beast people have magical abilities. Tsukasa says that magic is the key to understanding their situation, and that studying it should be their priority. During dinner, Winona offers the children a chance to try food prepared in the way of Tsukasa's world, and everyone is delighted. Winona recalls a legend of 7 heroes who came from another world to save their land from a dragon. However, one of the villagers expresses doubt and says he doesn't want to support strangers, then storms off. Tsukasa and his friends discuss their plans for the future, including the village's laws and a variety of tasks, thinking through the challenges ahead. The next day, Ringo announces that she has repaired their phones and retrieved a miniature reactor from the wreckage. She explains that a type of ore can be used to produce aluminum. In the middle of their conversation, they hear shouting. Knights have arrived, demanding resources from the village. Winona resists, unwilling to give in. The knights also offer protection to the women, noticing the lack of men. Just as they are about to grab one of the women, Tsukasa intervenes. The knight, displeased, orders his men to punish Tsukasa. The guards raise their weapons, but the girls swiftly knock them out, enraging the knight further. Tsukasa dodges the knight's attacks, then throws him to the ground, threatening him with a sword and calling him a parasite. Later, Prince Akatsuki appears and, using clever tricks, frightens the knights into promising not to report anything to the government. In the end, Tsukasa discusses their capabilities and future with his friends. They realize that, as the 7 prodigies, they truly have the power to change, or even destroy, this world. Masato and Elk arrive at a trading company to sell goods, but Masato is dissatisfied with the offered price. Before they leave, the merchant asks Elk to inform him if they find a different buyer. Elk is frustrated with Masato's decision, while a young girl watches them from afar. Masato explains that the prices won't help him achieve his goals. And though Elk agrees, he says they don't have much choice. Masato responds, "What's the point of life if you just drift along, always trying to please others?" The girl, overhearing, is surprised. Masato then expresses his frustration over the village's situation, asking Elk to trust him to solve their problems and improve their financial standing. He even promises to take down the trading company within a week. Meanwhile, Akatsuki is performing magic tricks for the village children, who watch in amazement. He throws a handkerchief and it turns into a bird, impressing everyone. Lyrule thanks Tsukasa for helping them, and he explains they're doing all they can to repay the villagers' kindness. Lyrule mentions that their supplies are running low, but Tsukasa reassures her that Masato and Elk went to town to get provisions. She worries about them getting along, remembering Elk's initial reluctance to let them stay in the village. Winona then appears, hinting that Elk hasn't been completely honest and explaining that he's been working hard to ensure everyone has enough supplies. She adds that the real issue is a man named Hoi, who monopolizes trade and keeps all the profits for himself. Tsukasa is confident that Masato, who understands economics and capitalism, will handle the situation, imagining Masato is already setting up a new trading enterprise. Elk then notices a trade agreement Masato acquired, which he got by visiting the mayor's house with help from Shinobu, who gathered intelligence for him. Masato explains that if this organization monopolizes trade, it's likely corrupt, with the mayor receiving bribes from the company. With only a few strategic comments, Masato secured the document. Shinobu departs, and Masato tells Elk they are now going shopping. Confused, Elk asks why they're buying when they came to sell, and Masato promises to teach him how to earn money. At that moment, the young girl from before approaches them, asking for help to make money. Masato agrees to teach her, though Elk doesn't understand why Masato is so willing to help everyone. Masato says he sees no greed in her eyes. The girl introduces herself as Lu, and Masato buys her new clothes, making her very happy. At a tavern, Masato makes deals with leaders from other villages to act as intermediaries for selling their goods, taking a 20% profit. They agree to reduce it to 10% if they do some of the work themselves. Masato explains the selling rules in detail and asks them to inform others. Elk, still unsure about Masato's ambitious plans, expresses concern, but Masato reassures him. By the next morning, they've stocked a warehouse without spending a single coin. Masato explains that it all relies on trust. Elk realizes they're making a profit without any expenses, using other people to handle sales. Soon, people flock to buy goods at reduced prices. Shinobu reports on the gathered intel, and Masato asks her to help transport goods. Returning to the village, everyone is amazed at the abundance of supplies. Tsukasa thanks Shinobu for her efforts. Meanwhile, the trading company Nelmania is unconcerned about Masato's enterprise, thinking it will collapse soon. However, a large crowd gathers to buy their goods, and Lu promotes their mayonnaise. This catches the interest of a trade representative named Klaus, who decides to buy some mayonnaise. Masato mentions hearing about the massive Eastern Friogard trade fleet, and their business continues to grow. Masato even forges an alliance with a trade group called the Sea Serpent, which infuriates Nelmania. Lu, excited, marvels at the huge number of coins they've earned. Seeing Elk still worried about Nelmania, Shinobu enters, remarking on how much they've earned and announcing that the real battle has begun. Nelmania plans to buy up their goods to crash the prices. Masato acknowledges it as a clever move, but says it's too late. He opens a window to reveal a crowd of people who are ready to take down Nelmania. Masato smiles, confident in their next steps. Tsukasa visits a cave rich in ore, where he notices that Ringo has already crafted aluminum tools. Impressed, he praises her work, and Ringo, blushing, responds that Masato has also done a lot to help them. During their conversation, Ringo yawns and apologizes for it. Tsukasa suggests she get some rest. As he walks through the village, he notices that snow has started falling, while the villagers wash clothes in the cold. Meanwhile, the head of the Nelmania Trading Company instructs his subordinates to buy up all the goods. Confident in their resources, he believes they can manage it. However, he's informed that they can't acquire a single item. Upon visiting the market himself, he finds people he previously fired. Masato explains that he miscalculated, and that goods will be purchased before they even reach the city. The head of Nelmania tries to raise the purchase price even higher, but the merchants refuse, leaving him horrified. The people explain that they don't trust him and won't risk their lives working with him again. Masato tells him it's his own fault for betraying the trust of the citizens, but offers to let him stay in the trade network if he agrees to new terms. Terrified, the Nelmania head reluctantly accepts. Masato then plays with Lu, a young girl, when Elk approaches and asks why he didn't completely destroy the company. Masato explains that such a move could backfire on them. He reveals that he actually created fake contracts, sharing that he's known as a devil in his world. Soon, some sailors arrive who once attempted to sell Lu. They trap her, and Masato asks her if she wants to be saved. She recalls her past and, in a moment of defiance, bites one of the sailors. Lu confesses her dream of buying her mother's freedom. Moved by her resolve, Masato decides to buy her from the sailors, noting her strong character. He apologizes to Elk for spending the money they earned, but Elk is supportive, glad that Masato made that choice. Tsukasa receives information from Shinobu, who is in high spirits. She reports on magic, explaining that there are 4 types. Tsukasa thanks her for the details, and she also mentions that there was once a religion about 7 heroes, which the Freygard Empire eradicated due to its anti-religious stance. Shinobu explains that to leave their current territory, they'll need a travel permit from a corrupt marquis. At the same time, Aoi and Kumausa complete a construction project and create a source of hot water. Later, Aoi enjoys a warm bath, marveling at Tsukasa's efficiency. Kana is amazed at how quickly he set everything up. When Winona, seeing the bath for the first time, asks about swimsuits while Ringo shyly joins them. Lirul arrives with a small jar and massages Tsukasa's tired hands in gratitude, and he thanks her in return. Just then, Akatsuki arrives, reporting that some villagers went hunting and encountered the Forest Lord. Tsukasa, Ringo, and others rush to help. Masato returns as they prepare, and Elk senses something is wrong. The Forest Lord, a massive creature, has cornered 3 hunters on a cliff. Just as it's about to strike, Aoi intervenes, throwing it off balance. Tsukasa asks about the wounded, and one villager mentions that the mayor was barely breathing. Tsukasa entrusts his care to Kaini. The Forest Lord rises, and Aoi engages it in combat, blocking its attacks skillfully. Kaine examines the mayor's wounds and assures the group that she can handle it. Aoi dodges the creature's tail and strikes it down with a single blow, defeating it. Meanwhile, Kini performs an emergency operation on the mayor, including heart massage, and successfully revives him. Tsukasa offers her a handkerchief, but Kini, unfazed, says she didn't even break a sweat. They head back. Later, royal knights led by Captain Inzaghi approach the village. He declares them under arrest for treason, accusing them of illegally possessing gold coins engraved with the Imperial Dragon Cross. Inzaghi claims that only noblemen have the right to handle the coins and orders that everything be burned. When Tsukasa and the others return, they see the village engulfed in flames. They want to rush into the fire, but Tsukasa stops them, trusting Akatsuki to handle the evacuation. Akatsuki uses magic to lead the villagers to safety. Masato realizes that they've drawn the attention of someone powerful. Amid the chaos, Tsukasa notices that Lirul is missing. Lirul takes a bath and then puts on a dress, admiring her reflection in the mirror. In the village, the residents realize that Lirul has disappeared. Elk insists they must go and rescue her, but Tsukasa stops him, warning that such an action would be equivalent to declaring war on an entire nation. He explains that even if they managed to save Lirul, the enemy would send troops to destroy their village. Tsukasa proposes risking Lirul's life to save everyone else, which angers Elk. Winona intervenes, stating that they can't live in peace if they sacrifice Lirul. She also notices blood on Tsukasa's hands, realizing he wants to save her too. Tsukasa tells the villagers that a serious battle with the nobility lies ahead, and asks if they're prepared for it. He adds that he'll help, but warns that this decision will change their lives, from politics to economy. Meanwhile, Lirul stands before Lord Findolf as a tribute. Findolf, looking at her lustfully, promises a generous reward. Remembering Captain Inazaki's earlier proposal for a non-aggression pact, Lirul accepts her fate, ready for whatever Findolf wants to do with her. But just as they're about to kiss, a flash of lightning strikes, forcing Findolf away from Lirul. Enraged, he orders her to be bound. At the same time, Ringo installs a powerful weapon on a mountain and informs Tsukasa it's ready. She fires a massive projectile, breaking part of the fortress wall. The villagers begin their assault, and Inazaki is shocked that they all survived. He orders the crossbowmen to kill the attackers, but notices that all villagers are equipped with lightweight duralumin shields. Duralumin, used in aircraft, surprises Inazaki with its lightness. He also realizes that some of his soldiers were killed by arrows made of metal. Aoi and Winona fight the guards, displaying their strength. Tsukasa thanks Shinobu for finding the secret passages and the castle's layout. They nearly reach their goal, but Shinobu stops Tsukasa just in time, saving him from a magical attack by the court wizard, who threatens to kill them. The girls continue fighting the soldiers, and some soldiers refuse to engage after witnessing the power of their opponents. Akatsuki, a powerful mage, throws poisonous bombs, causing the guards to flee in panic. Findolf notices the mage's absence and retreats with the remaining guards, which Masato sees, realizing it's already too late. Shinobu skillfully dodges magical attacks, noticing that the mage only attacks where he gestures. Sneaking up from behind, she neutralizes him with a taser. Inazaki then arrives. Shinobu tells Tsukasa to continue while she holds him off. Tsukasa enters the bedroom and is shocked to find Lirul tied up. At that moment, Findolf fires at him from under the bed, causing Tsukasa to drop to his knee. Findolf threatens Lirul, intending to punish her for the trouble caused, but Tsukasa unexpectedly rises, defending her, which leaves Findolf confused. Tsukasa pulls out a gun and points it at Findolf. Begging for mercy, Findolf asks him to lower the weapon, but Tsukasa refuses, declaring that too many have already died. He states his intention to reform the country's politics and establish a system where the people participate in governance. He fires a rubber bullet at Findolf's forehead, neutralizing him, and frees Lirul. As Lirul regains consciousness, her eyes start to glow, and her voice changes. She warns that a terrifying giant will soon consume this world and pleads for them to save it, reminding them of the 7 heroes. When she returns returns to herself, Lyrule begins to cry, realizing that the villagers risked everything to save her. Tsukasa embraces her, relieved that she's safe. The villagers gather, celebrating her rescue, and Tsukasa declares his intent to secure the village's independence from other countries. A wagon filled with girls dressed in bunny costumes arrives in the city, catching the attention of the townsfolk. Soon, Akatsuki appears before the crowd, introducing himself as a deity and demonstrating his powers by removing an obelisk with his staff. The people bring him offerings of mayonnaise and express their faith in his divinity. Meanwhile, Lyrule and Winona prepare dishes using new cooking tools, and Lyrule realizes she hasn't yet thanked Tsukasa. Masato can't believe Akatsuki accepted the role of a god, but Tsukasa explains that religion will help them declare independence and hand over governance to the people. Elk and Shinobu set out to gather information, with Elk agreeing to the plan. They continue visiting the city to use religion as a means of building influence. Walter von Heiserad, the city's mayor, plans to flee, but Tsukasa, disguised, intercepts him. Tsukasa reassures him that he doesn't intend to oppress the townsfolk but wants to bring order. He convinces the mayor to remain in his position and adopt the new religion. Following this, the mayor officially declares that the city will now be governed under a new faith known as the Seven Rays. One of the guards voices discontent with this change. Later, Tsukasa and his friends gather around a table, looking at photos where Tsukasa is dressed in women's clothing. Ringo blushes at the images. They discuss their next steps, and Tsukasa says he needs to secure their success, while the others can rest. He notices that Kani seems lost in thought. She requests a team for medicine production, and Tsukasa cautions her not to overwork herself. He also asks Aoi to protect Akatsuki and Ringo to work on building a power plant, with Masato assisting her. Masato mentions soldiers from various castles, prompting Tsukasa to consider forming his own guard called Seven Rays. Tsukasa decides to meet with the Silver Knight, Zest Bernard. Seeing Bernard as a trustworthy and honorable man, Tsukasa asks him to join their order of knights. However, Bernard declines, explaining that he left the guard to be closer to his family and fears that the Empire will eventually attack, so he doesn't want to get involved in war. Tsukasa respects his decision, but decides to try again. The next day, Tsukasa finds Bernard chopping wood and approaches him, mentioning that they overlooked an important matter. He requests that Bernard lead their knights. Bernard refuses again, citing that his devotion to his daughter comes first. He shares that he only served to stay close to her, feeling insignificant for choosing family over a greater cause. Tsukasa reassures him that protecting family isn't a weakness. After thinking it over, Bernard agrees to become a knight and pledges his loyalty to Tsukasa. Meanwhile, nobles gather in a bar, speaking ill of Tsukasa, who takes note of their actions and decides to monitor them. Shinobu, in disguise, gathers information from guards of a neighboring nation. She learns that Duke Heiser is preparing an army to crush their movement and plans to march toward them in spring. Elk waits for Shinobu, who returns to report that the Duke is praised for his strength, but that there are no specific details about his actions. Shinobu mentions her desire to meet him in person. At the same time, Findolf, who has lost his power and seeks to regain influence, travels to Duke Oslo El Gustav to request aid. However, the Duke, disdainful of Findolf's plea, furiously beheads him, declaring he has no use for weak and unworthy allies. Tsukasa presents a tax reform proposal to the nobles for discussion. After a long debate, his assistant notes that Tsukasa hasn't taken any breaks, and the officials are also working tirelessly around the clock. Tsukasa assures him that he'll rest once everything is settled. Meanwhile, in the village, people are busy building new homes, and Kini is helping heal the wounded. She tends to Winona's father, who recovers quickly and expresses his gratitude, saying he owes her his life. Winona remarks that her father missed a lot, including the battle against the Empire. Kini warns him that if he overworks himself, she'll put him to sleep for a long time to ensure he rests. Lu enters the room, visibly exhausted from her studies, and explains that Masato assigned her to learn multiplication, which she finds difficult. Kaine encourages her. At the same time, Masato, Tsukasa, and Ringo are nearly finished with the construction of a power station. Ringo mentions she has prepared batteries from the reactor, and Kumausa adds that a test run is scheduled for the next day. Tsukasa thanks everyone for their hard work. They plan their next project, creating machinery to manufacture weapons, as well as an anti-air defense system to guard against dragons, knowing from Shinobu about a weapon capable of destroying a city in one strike. Tsukasa warns that the northern ruler had already used a similar weapon before. Lyrule stops by to invite Tsukasa to lunch, but he declines, citing his busy schedule. Later, she talks talks to Masato, worried and in tears, as she feels Tsukasa has been avoiding her. Masato explains that when she was missing, Tsukasa was the only one initially against rescuing her, prioritizing the good of the majority. Meanwhile, Tsukasa realizes he hasn't rested and is feeling exhausted. Lirul enters, offering her help and saying she wants to thank him. Tsukasa reflects on the fact that he was once willing to leave her behind, but she reassures him, highlighting his kindness and care for the villagers. Tsukasa then shares a childhood memory. He once admired his father, a prominent politician, but later learned that his father achieved power by trampling over others, abusing authority. Tsukasa killed his father, and his mother hated him. Tsukasa grew to resent his father, who was eventually convicted and hanged, though it never truly erased his father's wrongdoings. Moved by his story, Lirul embraces Tsukasa and promises she won't judge him. Tsukasa apologizes and asks if he can rest on her lap. He falls asleep, and Ringo, witnessing this from afar, quietly walks away with the memory in mind. Lu continues to struggle with multiplication. Akatsuki feels embarrassed as well, hesitant to step into the water until Aoi playfully pushes him in, assuring him that she'll always be by his side. Akatsuki notices Lu looking downcast and learns that she's frustrated with her math struggles. Aoi shares how she practiced tirelessly as a child, and Akatsuki recalls how he trained to master his magic tricks. Kaini shares that she read countless books to become a doctor. Together, they encourage Lu to find her own purpose, and Akatsuki suggests visualizing coins for multiplication. Finally, Lu manages to grasp the concept, gaining newfound confidence. Shinobu drinks in a tavern, questioning the locals. One of the village girls mentions that they live peacefully thanks to Emperor Oslo El Gustave, and everyone feels quite comfortable under his rule. The girl apologizes and tells them they're welcome to rest, but a younger girl warns them that they should leave the village soon. Elk suspects that the villagers live too well to accept their new religion. Later, Shinobu surprises Elk by kissing him, causing him to blush deeply. Shinobu then notes something suspicious. The villagers fed them but didn't touch the food themselves, even though they looked starved. She remarks that they put on a friendly face, but their skin is rough and dry, indicating they're malnourished. Shinobu asks Elk to follow her, leading him to a hidden underground chamber where the grim truth about the villagers is revealed. They find a torture chamber where travelers are robbed and killed, with the bodies of victims all around. Suddenly, a guard calls the villagers outside for an inspection, as Jeanne de LeBlanc has arrived. The villagers greet her with forced smiles as she scrutinizes them. The inspection goes smoothly until one of the girls is found with a dirt-stained sleeve. Jeanne reminds everyone of the rule. They must always appear clean and uphold a certain standard. The guards decide to punish the girl, and her mother, unable to keep smiling, is forced by the guards to smile again. Elk wants to intervene, but Shinobu holds him back, reminding him that these villagers had planned to kill them. She suggests an alternative plan. Shinobu steps forward and interrupts the punishment, proposing a deal. She will surrender if they release the girl. Jean agrees, and Shinobu throws down her weapon, letting the guards take her away. Before leaving, she hands her phone to Elk, asking him to inform Tsukasa that she's surrendered. However, the guards take Shinobu somewhere unexpected. As she ponders how to escape her chains, Jana enters and dismisses the other guard. Shinobu comments that John underestimates the abilities of a ninja. Meanwhile, one of the townsfolk thanks Elk for saving her daughter. Elk tells her about the gruesome scene in the basement, shocking the woman. She reveals that the villagers had no other choice. They were originally a small village, but when Oslo El Gustave took power, he forced them to maintain a clean appearance and well-kept streets, all at their own expense. They couldn't afford to get dirty, so they ended up eating what little food they could find in the fields, but even that ran out. The woman says she can't keep smiling anymore. John releases Shinobu and thanks her for intervening for the girl. John explains that if Shinobu is from the Yamato Empire, then they share a common enemy, Oslo El Gustave. John asks for her help in resisting his oppression. Meanwhile, Oslo El Gustave admires his golden statue and orders his aide to construct 4 more. The aide warns that if they proceed, the people will suffer and possibly die, but Oslo dismisses the concerns. He also inquires about the army's readiness to advance, and his aide reports that the troops are waiting until spring. Infuriated by the delay, Oslo decides to use the Spear of the Sun. Lirul hears a warning voice in her head, sensing impending danger. Oslo hurls a spear into the sky. Lirul hears cries for help, while Ringo spots the object approaching their location. Ringo realizes it's set to land in the city center unless they act. She activates an anti-aircraft cannon, firing a missile to intercept it, but it isn't enough. Ringo recalculates its trajectory, and Tsukasa orders her to divert the spear away from the center. 3 more missiles are launched, with only 1 remaining, but the spear dodges them and continues its descent. The spear crashes into the center of the city and transforms into a fiery being, declaring that its flames will reduce everything to ashes. Tsukasa watches this from a building. The nobles are unsure of how to respond, and citizens panic and flee, but Akatsuki blocks their path, urging everyone to stay calm and informing them that the threat comes from another empire. Tsukasa, who had prepared an emergency plan for fires, assigns tasks to the nobles to carry out the plan. At this moment, Ringo calls Tsukasa to check on the situation, and he asks her to fulfill an additional request. Meanwhile, a guard saves some nobles, explaining that he did it for the sake of peace and the safety of all residents, regardless of social rank. Tsukasa orders the streets to be widened to stop the fire from spreading, but the fiery creature summons minions that begin igniting people and nearby buildings. Tsukasa decides to retreat with the townspeople to a park, but has one more idea in mind. Lirul, who has been hearing mysterious voices in her head, explains that to save the city they need to destroy the spear, as it is the creature's heart. She asks Tsukasa to trust her, and he agrees. Ringo arrives, and Tsukasa decides to destroy the spear with a missile. However, the missile can't reach the spear due to distance and the fire. Aoi volunteers to carry the missile through the flames and detonate it at the target. Tsukasa entrusts her with this mission, and she sets off. Ringo launches the missile, and Aoi runs beside it, guiding it through the obstacles. Along the way, she encounters flames, dodging them, then redirects the missile upward to avoid more fire. Maneuvering skillfully, Aoi narrowly avoids being struck by flames. Using her abilities, she detonates the missile at the right moment, destroying the spear, and with it the fiery creature. The flames die down, and the spirits trapped within the spear are freed from their curse, vanishing into the sky. Observing the events and bleeding, Oslo El Gustave grows even angrier. Tsukasa thanks Lirul for her success and shakes her hand. He also reflects that even if they hadn't started this war, it likely would have happened anyway due to the aggressive policies of other nations. Lirul mentions the mysterious voice she heard, and resolves to study magic to discover if it might help bring Tsukasa and the others home. Tsukasa supports her goal. The townspeople thank Akatsuki for saving them, and Tsukasa contacts Shinobu to inform her about the spear. She begins to worry, but Tsukasa reassures her, although she is still frustrated at not discovering the threat sooner. Tsukasa tells Masato about the voice Lirul heard, and Masato ponders whether it's a friend or foe. Meanwhile, a battalion led by Bernard prepares to go into battle with new weaponry. Tsukasa decides that they will strike first. Oslo El Gustave orders his assistant, Oscar, to gather all the troops for an attack, telling them that if they don't want to die, they should fight immediately. This information is relayed to Shinobu and John comments that it's the perfect time to strike back. As soldiers march through the cold, they grumble about Oslo El Gustave, discontented with his leadership, but hopeful that their 3,000-strong army will be enough. When they reach the checkpoint, Tsukasa troops open fire on them with modern weapons, causing chaos. The commander gives the order to retreat, but Tsukasa troops pursue them. Their leader decides to fake his own death in order to lure the enemy into a trap. Back in the city, Oslo El Gustave addresses his massive army, while Bernard's forces encounter a heavily armored cavalry that charges straight at them. Although their guns prove ineffective, Bernard remembers Tsukasa's plan and deploys grenades, easily routing the enemy forces. The commander's troops withdraw. Meanwhile, Oslo El Gustave delivers a rousing speech to his soldiers, ordering them to devastate the northern lands. Suddenly, Jean shoots at him, declaring it's time for a rebellion. The entire army switches sides to support Jean. Kumausa informs Ringo that the leaders are barricaded in their castles, just as Tsukasa predicted. Drones appear, carrying messages of surrender and demanding the leaders acknowledge defeat. They surrender their weapons. At the same time, Oslo El Gustave finds himself surrounded by all the soldiers who have defected to Jean. She urges him to surrender honorably, but he refuses, threatening to burn everything down. Jean and Shinobu engage him in battle. Oslo El Gustave summons fire spheres as the women coordinate an attack, with Shinobu blinding him while Jean tries to strike, though he melts her blade, injuring her. Shinobu suffers burns too, but Jean manages to wound him from behind. To save Jean, Shinobu throws a shuriken at a chandelier, which crashes down on him. In a last act, Oslo El Gustave uses his own blood to launch a final blow that leads to his death. The women survive, and peace starts to settle over the city. Shinobu mentions that they couldn't find the Duke's body, though the soldiers claim to have defeated him. A surviving commander realizes that he cannot replicate their weapons, and acknowledges that Tsukasa had anticipated their every move. Arclight accepts defeat and agrees to their religion. Later, the girls enjoy massages with imperial oils, feeling deeply relaxed. Ringo, feeling self-conscious, expresses that she doesn't feel as attractive as the others because of her smaller figure, but the others other girls reassure her. Meanwhile, Tsukasa and Masato are enjoying royal tea when the girls enter wearing beautiful dresses. They notice that Akatsuki has also dressed in a gown for security purposes, which draws laughter. Masato asks about Lirula, and Tsukasa explains that she's studying magic. Her teacher praises her abilities, saying she is progressing at a level on par with great mages. Tsukasa reflects that Lirule is indeed an asset to their side. As they plan their next steps with the Azure Squad, Tsukasa considers the exhaustion of the troops after the battle with Oslo El Gustave. He remarks that forming alliances with them may be difficult given the toll the battle has taken. The group discusses forming an alliance with the Azure Squad, but Tsukasa warns that Conrad has deceived them. Tsukasa had asked Conrad about a golden statue, and Conrad claimed he didn't know where it was. Tsukasa points out that they still don't know if Gustave is truly dead, and making any public accusations won't have much effect. Tsukasa wants to gain the people's trust, as this would shift the balance and allow them to pressure the Azure Squad more effectively. Kana interrupts, suggesting that Tsukasa and Ringo take a 10-day break to rest, which they agree to. Tsukasa invites Ringo on a date. Kumausa learns that Ringo is going on a date, but Ringo feels unsure about what to do and seeks advice from Aoi. Aoi suggests sparring to ease her nerves. Then Ringo consults Kani, who jokingly suggests Ringo go to a cafe, use chloroform to make her date fall asleep, and then she can do whatever she likes. Still unsure, Ringo takes a bath to calm herself when Shinobu arrives. Shinobu, in her usual playful manner, tells Ringo that love is like a hunt and offers to teach her some secret arts. When Ringo arrives at their meeting spot, she remembers Shinobu's advice to be patient and wait. Tsukasa notices her and approaches, which makes Ringo feel shy and flustered. Tsukasa picks up on this. To avoid further attention, they decide to change outfits and wear costumes with animal ears. As people stare, Ringo wonders if she's truly suited to be by Tsukasa's side. She decides to follow Shinobu's advice by trying to hold his hand, intentionally falling so that Tsukasa will catch her. Before they know it, they arrive at the restaurant. They begin eating, and Ringo, still thinking of Shinobu's advice, tries to create an indirect kiss by mixing up their cups. When she realizes what she's done, she becomes incredibly embarrassed and nearly faints. Memories surface of her childhood. Ringo was born with a high intellect due to scientific interventions and quickly excelled, even winning an award at age 6. Her mother disapproved, and when Ringo once completed her mother's work for her, her mother yelled at her, leading young Ringo to train even harder. Eventually, her mother abandoned her, saying she should never have been born. Later, at school, while Ringo was questioning her purpose, Tsukasa approached her, asking if she could fix his father's watch. She agreed, and Tsukasa thanked her, bringing her more broken items to repair over time. Ringo diligently fixed each one, until one day she faced a speaker she couldn't repair, as it was no longer manufactured. Declining Tsukasa's request for the first time, she announced that she would start inventing things herself. On her way home, she overheard Tsukasa praising her for her skills, which gave her a sense of purpose. Ringo wakes up resting on Tsukasa's lap and realizes she lost consciousness for a while. She laughs it off, saying she had a pleasant dream, then suggests they take a photo together. Tsukasa admires the beauty of the city around them and then makes a special request, something that only Ringo can accomplish. Returning to Kumausa afterward, Ringo feels deeply pensive and mentions that tomorrow will mark the start of her biggest project yet. Ringo dives into her research, developing a critical project. Meanwhile, Shinobu informs Tsukasa that Marquis Conrad has traveled to the Imperial Castle to submit a request to join them. In the city, a sudden outbreak of sepsis spreads, leaving many residents ill. Kina tirelessly tends to the patients, creating medicine to help, but is interrupted by people accusing her of relying on false deities, saying there's nothing she can do. An elder claims he could help, but has been forbidden from using the necessary medicine. Agatsuki reassures the townspeople that Kani will find a way to save them. When she arrives, Kani explains her plan to create a remedy using coal. The skeptics laugh and leave, but Kani goes ahead, helping a sick girl ease her pain and stating that they will make the medicine with the help of Lyrule's magic. She explains that they'll purify the coal, produce benzene, then add sulfuric acid and ammonia. By nightfall, they succeed in creating the treatment and distribute it to each patient, who all begin to recover. Kaina praises the girl's body for fighting off the illness. Meanwhile, Count Sorrentius and some men, upset by Kaini's success with stone medicine, plot to sabotage it by turning it into a poison. Overhearing them, Kaini intervenes, paralyzing them with her needles. She confronts the leader, saying she despises his disregard for life. As a doctor, Kini expresses contempt for any god who created flawed beings, but she takes it upon herself to grant eternal life to bodies made to die. With the treatment's success, the townspeople recover, but Elk notices that Count Sorrentius has mysteriously changed in demeanor. In the Imperial Castle, Conrad meets General Nura, who states that he will not punish the Azure Squad but will gather information on the 7 luminaries to fight against them. He orders the squad to be well equipped, introducing an officer skilled in fire magic Republic and directing them to eliminate all threats, asserting that only Emperor Linworm should hold power. Meanwhile, Ringo completes a rocket. Tsukasa discusses with her what it takes to build a stable country, comparing it to building a child's toy house, noting that to maintain peace, they need strength. Jean hopes for a future where even the Azure Squad can live as decent humans. Suddenly, she encounters a knight who attempts to kill her, declaring he'll do it himself. She dodges his attacks and retaliates, but he orders his crossbowmen to fire and the guards capture her. He boasts about having killed Bunhart and gives the guards permission to do as they wish with her. As they tear her clothes, Shinobu intervenes, rescuing Jean and fighting alongside her. Together, they defeat the knight, with Shinobu using a shock weapon and Jean landing a fatal blow. Shinobu then takes Jean to a hidden underground chamber beneath the castle, where they find a statue Conrad had secretly stolen. Jean voices her doubts about the Empire, stating they behave like animals and should be helping one another instead. Shinobu invites Jean to join the 7 luminaries whose goal aligns with her beliefs. Just then, Count Conrad enters, accompanied by a masked figure, casting a shadow over their conversation. The man in the cloak notices that the statue has been destroyed. He warns that he won't execute them for betrayal, but for destroying his statue, he punishes them without hesitation. Shinobu and Jean see a crystal light up on his body and decide to flee. At that moment, flames consume everything around them, including the guards, as the fire engulfs the entire castle. Shinobu reports back to Tsukasa, who urges her to hurry. Meanwhile, Oslo El Gustav creates 4 spears, and a rocket launches into the sky above his castle. It explodes, leaving a powerful trail of destruction. Jean is horrified by the immense flames, thinking it must be Gustav's power, but Shinobu explains that it's actually the work of their group, the 7 luminaries, who are capable of wiping out any country. Observing the bright fire in the sky, everyone realizes that Tsukasa has just launched a rocket as a signal and a symbol of their power. Masato, looking at the sky, remarks that they can now start printing money, while Ringo confirms the rocket's successful hit. Tsukasa thanks her for her hard work, explaining that this display of strength was necessary to initiate negotiations. He calls their power a bridge to happiness, and Ringo realizes that Tsukasa is framing things this way to take the responsibility upon himself. She assures him that she doesn't blame him. Gathering all the citizens, Tsukasa makes an official statement. He declares that the Empire attacked the Azure Squad, and in response, he launched the rocket, destroying the northern lands. These lands are now under the rule of the 7 luminaries. Tsukasa promises to create a just nation where everyone will own the land they live on, forming a republic. He says that their children shouldn't live in a world where nobles decide their fate, and asks the people if they're ready to defend their rights and honor. Thus, the Republic of Elm is born. Suddenly, Oslo El Gustave appears in the center of the city, having survived the explosion, but now in the form of a demon, thirsting for revenge and destruction. Aoi and Shinobu rush into battle, while Lirul points them to the crystal in his chest. The creature attacks them with fireballs, which they manage to dodge. Aoi gets close and attempts to strike the crystal but breaks her sword, further enraging the demon. Tsukasa shoots at him, and the bullet hits the crystal, shattering it. The creature confronts Tsukasa, mocking his quest for justice, saying that humans are doomed to be unable to save one another and that the world creates the chosen few to wield power. After these words, the demon vanishes. As dawn breaks, standing on a high cliff, the girls see how the world is changing. The imperial ruler observes the destruction, realizing that the 7 luminaries have become a serious threat. Waking up, Tsukasa recalls the demon's words, coming to grips with his doubts and deceit, realizing that his friends may have become skilled at political manipulation. Later, they gather in a house where they find mayonnaise in plastic bottles and decide to celebrate their victory. Tsukasa sits between 2 girls, who both invite him to try some honey. He interrupts the celebration to reflect on his own failures and what the 7 luminaries may have overlooked.